So I started to talk about it in my last video and realized I'm like, it's long enough. But one of the things is that when you write for journalism, there's a sense of that stories have different phases. And the idea there is whenever you have a story, like if you ever work for a media organization, you will have access to a wire service. It could be Wall Street Journal, it could be LA Times, the Chicago Tribune wire service, it could be, Washington Post wire service, but it could be the Associated Press, Reuters, things like that. And so, but Associated Press would be most common. And what Associated Press does is they have a slug. We've talked about that. But then they'll write right through. And right through is like, it'll be like first right through, second right through, third right through, fourth right through. And it can go up to like 89th right through on a big story. Something like, like a shooting or a murder or a trial or something like that. And so what happens is every time a new development comes in, the reporter writes the story. Maybe there's been a shooting in Springfield and it says, police are on the scene of a shooting in downtown. And then you find out that a man has been shot, so then the next write through says a 32-year-old man was shot Tuesday in Springfield. He has been taken to St. John's. Okay, and then you find out the man's died. It says a 33-year-old Springfield man, whatever age I gave you, died Tuesday from a gunshot wound at St. John's Hospital after being shot, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of go through that. But the idea is every time you write and you update it based upon the information. And so the first time you put it out there, or the first few times you write it, it's going to be emphasizing very much on the news, right? What's happening? Somebody's been shot. Somebody has died. Somebody has been taken to the hospital. And so it's whatever is happening at that moment. But then what happens is after maybe a day, or if you're in an online environment, maybe even after like 5 or 6 hours, the fact that somebody's been shot is no longer news because everybody who's online, or most people who already have seen that. And so what happens is now the important thing is what's going on with the investigation, or how did the person, or why was the person killed, or how are the police investigating? Has somebody been arrested, right? And then, so what happens is you change it. And so the next time you write the lead, instead of writing like a Springfield man was shot and killed, it might be a Peoria man has been arrested for the shooting death of a Springfield man early Tuesday. Okay, something like that. And so what happens is as the story develops, you change from, what actually happened, the crime, to the arrest, to other things. But then what happens is after like 24 hours, maybe you're still talking about the story, but maybe at this point you're talking about how the crime unfolded. You're talking about that. Or maybe you're talking about the family and how they're dealing with it. For example, I mean, just as an example, like one time I remember, because I was just recently, I drove by this place when I was in Peoria working. I remember one of the reporters, there was a guy who, he was an overnight clerk at a gas station, like a Circle K or something, and he ended up, not the greatest area, but he ended up, a robber came in and shot and killed him. So the first lead would be, a man working the overnight shift was shot and killed. Well, then the next day, or a little bit longer, farther into the news cycle, the emphasis became, who was this man that was shot, right? And so it was a story, there were stories about him. Ends up, it was kind of a really poignant story. Like, this guy was working an extra shift because he was trying to make money for his family. Some guy comes in, robs him, he kills him. And one of the reasons he was trying to raise money was the refrigerator in their house had broken. And he was hoping to get, by working a few extra shifts, he could make enough money that they could get a new refrigerator. And so when people read that, then they ended up donating like a local, I believe like one of the local power company. It used to be Ameren, used to have different divisions like Silco, Illinois Power, Central Illinois Public Service, and now they're all kind of this one, although Springfield has its own power company. But used to be all these separate individual or local power companies. And so the CEO of that local one, or the local division of Ameren, ended up donating like a refrigerator and paid for their funeral. And so the idea there is no longer is the story about just the actual crime, but now it's about the man. And then maybe later it's about, maybe it's about crime in general, and maybe it's about something else. And so as the story develops, it becomes a different story. And oftentimes what happens is, like, if you have a school shooting, suppose, or, you have just a shooting in general, a workplace shooting, maybe the first story is about the shooting. And then the next day it's about shootings in general and how to be safe in the workplace and what to do if this happens. And so what happens is as the story goes along, you kind of have to be, and I've never really gotten into this on a deep level, but one of the things you need to think about when you're writing is, where are you in the news cycle? You don't want to continue to talk about a man was shot Tuesday and now people are donating money. You want to keep it based upon the right through, on what the current news. You need to know your news cycle and know what would be the most important at that point.